You know that feeling when you capture the perfect shot? When everything aligns just right, and you know you've created something that will be remembered forever. Well, I got that feeling at Sarah and Marcus's wedding. Except this time, I wasn't just capturing their love story. I was documenting the end of it and orchestrating the most complex revenge plot of my 12-year photography career. But let me start from the very beginning, because this story doesn't begin with a wedding. It begins with a lie, a chance encounter, and a decision that would change multiple lives forever. My name is Alex Chun. Yes, I share a last name with the bride. More on that coincidence later, and I've been a wedding photographer since 2012. I started the business after losing my job as a photojournalist when my newspaper downsized. Wedding photography seemed like a natural transition. Good money, creative freedom, and the chance to capture people's happiest moments. By 2024, I'd built a solid reputation in the Portland wedding scene. My style was documentary-focused with artistic flair, and I charged premium rates for $1,500 for full wedding coverage, which included engagement photos, wedding day photography, and a custom album. I was booked solid 18 months in advance, which is exactly how far ahead Sarah Chun had planned when she first contacted me. The initial consultation was at a trendy coffee shop in Northwest Portland. Sarah arrived exactly on time, 2 p.m., carrying a leather portfolio that I would soon learn contained everything from venue floor plans to fabric swatches to a detailed timeline of the entire wedding day. She was petite, probably 5 feet 2 inches, with shoulder-length black hair and the kind of genuine smile that made you want to smile back. She worked as a pediatric nurse at Oregon Health and Science University, and within 5 minutes of meeting her, I understood why kids would trust her immediately. "I've been following your work for 2 years," she told me, pulling out printed copies of my portfolio photos. "I love how you capture genuine emotions instead of just posed shots. I want my wedding photos to tell a story." If only she knew what story they would actually tell. Marcus arrived 20 minutes late, which should have been my first red flag. He was tall, maybe 6 feet 1 inch, with perfectly styled brown hair and the kind of aggressive confidence that comes with expensive suits and corner offices. He worked as a corporate lawyer at Brennan, Walsh & Associates, one of Portland's most prestigious firms, and he made sure everyone knew it. "Sorry I'm late," he said, not sounding sorry at all. "Client emergency. You know how it is." Sarah immediately stood to hug him, her face lighting up like he'd just returned from war instead of being 20 minutes late to plan their wedding. "It's okay, baby. I was just showing Alex some of the photos I love." Marcus barely glanced at my portfolio. "Yeah, looks good. Sarah handles all the wedding stuff. I just write the checks." He laughed at his own joke, while Sarah's smile faltered slightly. During that first meeting, I learned their story, or at least the version Sarah believed. They'd met 3 years earlier at a charity gala for the Children's Hospital. Marcus's firm was a sponsor, and Sarah was there representing the pediatric nursing staff. He'd asked her to dance. They'd talked all night, and he'd called her the next day. It was, according to Sarah, love at first sight. Marcus's version was more clinical. "She's perfect wife material," he told me when Sarah stepped away to use the restroom. "Stable career, good family, wants kids. Plus, her father owns Chun Construction. They've got the contract for half the new developments in Portland. It's a good match." The way he said good match instead of "I love her" should have been red flag number 2, but at the time, I chalked it up to him being one of those guys who wasn't comfortable expressing emotions to strangers. Sarah returned with a detailed timeline she'd printed out. "I know this might seem like overkill," she said, "but I want everything to be perfect. I've been dreaming about my wedding day since I was a little girl." She showed me photos of her parents' wedding in Taiwan, her grandmother's dress that she planned to incorporate into her own design, and a Pinterest board with 847 pins titled Our Perfect Day. The level of planning was impressive but also heartbreaking, knowing what I know now about how little Marcus cared about any of it. We scheduled the engagement session for 6 weeks later, and they put down a $2,000 deposit. Standard procedure. What wasn't standard was Marcus insisting on paying in cash, claiming it was better for taxes. I should have questioned this, but I was more focused on the technical aspects of the job, the venue, the lighting conditions, the shot list Sarah had prepared. Over the following weeks, Sarah called me several times with questions and updates. Marcus had surprised her with a 2-week honeymoon in Italy. Her dress fitting was ahead of schedule. The venue coordinator was being difficult about vendor access times. Normal bride stuff, except Sarah approached it all with the efficiency of someone planning a military operation. "I know I'm probably driving you crazy with all these calls," she said during one conversation, "but this wedding means everything to me. I want it to be perfect, not just for the day, but for the memories. I want to look at these photos when I'm 80 and remember exactly how happy I felt." That comment would haunt me for months. The engagement session was scheduled for Thursday, October 12th at 6:30 p.m. in Riverside Park. Sarah had chosen a location because it was where Marcus first told her he loved her, 6 months into their relationship. She showed me a selfie they'd taken on the exact bench, both of them grinning like teenagers. "I want to recreate that moment," she'd explained. "Maybe we could do some shots on the bench, and then some walking along the river path." I found this photographer on Instagram who did something similar, and the photos were just magical. I arrived at 5:45 p.m. to scout the lighting conditions. October in Portland can be unpredictable, but that evening was perfect. Clear skies, golden hour approaching, and just enough breeze to add movement to Sarah's hair in the shots. I was setting up my equipment near the bench when I saw him. Marcus was already there, but he wasn't alone, and he definitely wasn't with Sarah. The woman with him was petite and blonde, wearing medical scrubs and white sneakers. They were sitting on Sarah's bench, the bench where he'd supposedly first declared his love, and they were kissing like it was their last day on Earth. I froze. My first instinct was to look away, to pretend I hadn't seen anything. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe this was a cousin, or a sister, or literally anyone other than what it obviously was. But then I heard him laugh, that same distinctive laugh I'd heard during our consultation, and say something that made my blood run cold. "God, Jess, I can't wait until this wedding nonsense is over. 3 more months of playing the perfect fiancé, and then we can stop sneaking around." The woman, Jess, giggled and wrapped her arms around his neck. "I still can't believe you're actually going through with it. Are you really sure about this plan?" "Trust me," Marcus replied, his voice carrying clearly in the evening air. "Sarah's family money is worth a few years of marriage. Her dad's construction business alone is worth millions, and he's already talking about bringing me into the company after the wedding. Once I'm legally family and have access to the books, I can work my way up from the inside. Then, when I've got what I need, we'll have our real wedding. But what about Sarah? She's so sweet, and she really loves you." Marcus shrugged. "She'll get over it, and she'll get a generous divorce settlement, so it's not like she's losing everything. She gets to be married to a successful lawyer for a few years. I get access to her family's business connections, and you get me in the end. Everyone wins. Except she has no idea that her husband will be planning his exit strategy from day one. What she doesn't know won't hurt her. Besides, it's not like I'm going to be a bad husband. I'll play the part. We'll have the house, the kids, the whole suburban dream. I just won't be emotionally invested in it." I crouched behind the oak trees, my telephoto lens trained on them, and felt physically sick. This beautiful, kind woman who had shown me pictures of her dream dress and talked about wanting to start a family was about to marry someone who saw her as a business acquisition. But here's the thing about being a photographer, especially a former photojournalist. We're trained observers. We notice details others miss. We see patterns, connections, and stories that aren't immediately obvious. And right then, watching Marcus kiss his girlfriend while planning to defraud my client, I started seeing a different kind of story unfold. I also started taking pictures. I know, ethically questionable. But my photojournalist instincts kicked in, and I documented everything. The kiss, the conversation, the way they looked at each other. The license plate of the red Honda Civic she was driving, Oregon plates, 847 R&D, which I wrote down on my phone. Every detail that might matter later. They talked for another 20 minutes, and I learned quite a bit. Jess worked at OHSU, the same hospital where Sarah worked, but in a different department. They'd been seeing each other for 8 months, which meant Marcus had been cheating on Sarah for most of their engagement. She knew about the wedding, knew about Sarah and was completely okay with the plan because Marcus had promised they'd be together for real once he'd extracted what he needed from the marriage. The most nauseating part was when Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Jess photos from Sarah's bridal shower the previous weekend. "Look how happy she looks," Jess said, scrolling through the pictures. "She really has no idea. That's what makes this so easy," Marcus replied. "She trusts me completely. She even added me to her bank accounts last month. Said she wanted to start practicing being married." They kissed again, made plans to meet the following Tuesday at some place called The Usual Spot, and then went their separate ways. Marcus left first, checking his watch and muttering something about needing to get home before Sarah started wondering where he was. I stayed hidden until they were both gone, then sat on that bench, their bench, Sarah's bench, and tried to process what I just witnessed. I could have called Sarah right then, could have told her what I'd seen, but I also knew how these situations usually played out. She'd confront Marcus. He'd deny everything, claim it was just a friend or not what it looked like, or come up with some elaborate explanation. Without rock-solid proof, it would be his word against mine, a stranger she'd hired to take pictures. Besides, I've been a journalist long enough to know that people often don't want to believe inconvenient truths, especially when those truths threaten to destroy something they've invested heavily in emotionally and financially. So I made a decision that would define the next 3 months of my life. I was going to get proof. Undeniable, impossible to dismiss, photographically documented proof. But not the kind you might think. When Sarah called an hour later asking where I was, I apologized profusely and said I'd had a family emergency. We rescheduled for the following week, and I spent the intervening time researching Marcus Holloway like he was a story I was investigating. Being a photojournalist teaches you how to research people, and Marcus made it easy. He was active on social media, had a professional website through his law firm, and was the kind of person who liked to broadcast his success. Within 48 hours, I had a comprehensive profile of his life, habits, and connections. Marcus James Holloway, 31, graduated from Lewis and Clark Law School in 2018. Joined Brennan, Walsh & Associates as an associate in 2019, specializing in personal injury and corporate law. Lived in a Pearl District condo that he was still paying off, drove a leased BMW 3 Series, and had a social media presence that screamed aspiring rich guy trying too hard. His Instagram was particularly revealing. Lots of photos of expensive dinners, craft cocktails, and gym selfies. But what interested me were the patterns. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, he posted photos from the same coffee shop, Grind Coffee, on NW 23rd. The timestamps were always between 7 o'clock and 8:30 p.m. His LinkedIn showed connections to several people at OHSU, which wasn't unusual given that his firm handled medical malpractice cases. But one connection caught my attention. Jessica Manning, radiology technician at OHSU Hospital. Jessica Manning. Jess. Her profile photo matched the blonde woman I'd seen him with. Further investigation of her social media revealed that she was 28, single, according to her Facebook status, and had been working at OHSU for 4 years. Her Instagram posts showed the same coffee shop that appeared in Marcus's photos, often at the same times, though they were careful never to appear in each other's pictures. But the really interesting discovery came when I cross-referenced their social media activity with Sarah's posts. There were several occasions where Sarah had posted about working late shifts or picking up extra hours, and those same evenings would show Marcus and Jess both posting from various locations around Portland, different locations, but the timestamps suggested they were together. On October 20th, Sarah posted, "Another 16-hour shift in pediatric ICU. Thank goodness Marcus is understanding about these crazy hours. Red heart." That same evening, Marcus posted a photo of craft beer from Migration Brewing, timestamped 9:47 p.m. Jessica posted a photo of food from the same restaurant, timestamped 9:52 p.m. They were being careful, but not careful enough. I also discovered that Marcus's financial situation was more precarious than his social media suggested. Public records showed that his condo was mortgaged to the hilt. He had significant credit card debt, and his BMW was leased at a rate that suggested he was overextending himself to maintain his image. Sarah, on the other hand, owned her house outright, a gift from her parents when she started her nursing career, had substantial savings, and came from a family with serious money. Her father, David Chun, had built Chun Construction from a one-man operation into one of Portland's most successful general contractors. They'd built half the new apartment complexes in southeast Portland and had recently landed the contract for a major mixed-use development in the Pearl District. The financial motive was obvious, but I needed more than just circumstantial evidence. I needed to document their relationship in a way that couldn't be explained away. So I started following them, not in a stalkerish way. I told myself I was conducting a legitimate investigation to protect my client from fraud. I mapped out their patterns, learned their routines, and began documenting their relationship with the same thoroughness I'd once used to investigate corrupt politicians. Tuesdays and Thursdays at Grind Coffee, always the back corner booth, always between 7 o'clock and 8:30 p.m. Wednesday evenings at Jessica's apartment on Southeast Division Street. I never got closer than the street, but Marcus's BMW was parked outside every Wednesday from 6 p.m. to approximately 11 p.m. Saturday mornings at the farmers market in the Pearl District, where they walked together but maintained the pretense of being casual acquaintances who'd run into each other. I photographed all of it. Telephoto lenses, long-range shots, careful documentation that captured their body language, their expressions, and their obvious intimacy. I built a dossier that would have made my old editor proud. But the more I learned about their relationship, the angrier I became. This wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated con game, and Sarah was the mark. During one of their coffee shop meetings, Tuesday, October 31st, Halloween, which fell appropriate, I positioned myself at a table across the room and used a directional microphone attachment I'd bought for wedding videography to record their conversation. "The wedding's in 4 months," Jessica said, stirring her latte. "Are you really going to be able to go through with it? The ceremony, the vows, the whole performance?" "It's not a performance," Marcus replied. "It's an investment. For months of preparation for years of payoff. But what if she finds out? What if someone sees us together? Who's going to see us? We're careful. And even if someone did, Sarah trusts me completely. She'd never believe it without absolute proof. I just feel bad for her sometimes. She's planning this huge wedding, and she has no idea her groom is already planning the divorce." Marcus leaned across the table and took Jessica's hand. "Hey, we've been over this. Sarah gets to be married to a successful lawyer. She gets a few good years, and when it's over, she gets a generous settlement. She's not losing. She just doesn't know the timeline. And her family's business? That's the real prize. Her dad's already talking about bringing me into the company. Once I'm family, I'll have access to their client lists, their financial records, their bidding strategies. I can use that information to start my own firm, maybe even poach some of their bigger clients. By the time the divorce is final, I'll be established enough that I won't need their money anymore." That sounds like fraud. That sounds like business. Sarah's dad built his empire by being smart and opportunistic. I'm just being smart and opportunistic too. I had it all on tape. The confession, the motive, the timeline. But I still wasn't ready to confront Sarah with the truth, because I knew that even with audio evidence, Marcus would find a way to explain it away or manipulate her into believing his version of events. That's when I decided to get creative. The rescheduled engagement session took place on November 2nd, and it was torture. Sarah was radiant. She'd gotten her hair done that morning and was wearing a flowing blue dress that photographed beautifully in the golden hour light. Marcus played the loving fiancé perfectly, holding her hand, whispering things that made her laugh, and gazing at her with what looked like genuine affection. If I hadn't known better, I would have believed he loved her. "These are going to be beautiful," Sarah said as I adjusted my camera settings. "I can't wait to use them for our save the dates." Marcus smiled and pulled her closer. "Just think, in 4 months we'll be doing this again, but as husband and wife." The casual cruelty of it made me physically ill, but also gave me an idea. During a break while Sarah fixed her makeup, Marcus stepped away to take a phone call. I couldn't hear the whole conversation, but I caught enough to know he was talking to Jessica. "Yeah, the photographer's here." "No, she doesn't suspect anything. I'll see you tomorrow at the usual place. Love you too," he said Love you too. To Jessica, while his fiancée was 20 feet away, touching up her lipstick so she'd look perfect in their engagement photos. That's when my plan began to form. You see, wedding photography isn't just about capturing moments. It's about composing images that tell a story. Every great wedding photographer knows that the way you arrange people, the angles you choose, and the details you include all contribute to the narrative of the day. What most people don't realize is that a skilled photographer can compose images to tell a story that isn't immediately obvious. You can embed information in the positioning of people, the arrangement of objects, even the sequence of shots. And if you're really good, you can do it in a way that looks completely natural until someone knows to look for it. Over the next few weeks, I developed what I privately called the documentation project. It wasn't just about exposing Marcus's affair. It was about creating an undeniable record of the truth that couldn't be dismissed, explained away, or ignored. The plan had several phases. Phase 1, complete documentation. I would continue following Marcus and Jessica, building a comprehensive photographic record of their relationship. Every meeting, every intimate moment, every indication of their ongoing affair and their plan to defraud Sarah. Phase 2, infiltration. I would insert myself more deeply into the wedding planning process, volunteering to help with vendor coordination and timeline management. This would give me access to more information about the wedding plans and more opportunities to observe Marcus's behavior. Phase 3, the reveal. On the wedding day itself, I would use my skills as a photographer to compose the wedding photos in a way that would gradually reveal the truth to Sarah. Not obviously, not in a way that would ruin the day for everyone else, but clearly enough that when she looked through her wedding album, the story would be unmistakable. It was ambitious, elaborate, and probably crazy. But it was also the only way I could think of to give Sarah the truth in a way that couldn't be denied or manipulated. The first test of Phase 2 came when Sarah called me in mid-November. "Alex, I have a huge favor to ask," she said. "I know this is outside your normal services, but I'm drowning in vendor coordination. The venue coordinator is being impossible. The caterer keeps changing the menu, and my maid of honor just moved to Seattle for a new job. Would you be willing to help me manage some of the timeline stuff? I'd pay you extra, obviously." It was perfect. Of course, I told her. Wedding photography is about more than just taking pictures. I want our day to be perfect. You're a lifesaver. Could you meet me and Marcus this weekend to go over everything? The meeting was at their favorite restaurant, a trendy place in the Pearl District that Marcus had probably chosen to impress Sarah with his sophisticated taste. I arrived with a detailed folder of timeline templates, vendor contact lists, and coordination strategies I'd developed over 12 years of wedding photography. Sarah was, as always, incredibly organized. She had spreadsheets, floor plans, and a minute-by-minute breakdown of the entire wedding day. Marcus, on the other hand, seemed more interested in his phone than in the wedding planning. "This is amazing," Sarah said, flipping through my coordination materials. "I knew there was a reason I wanted to work with you. Just tell me what you need," I replied. "I want this day to be everything you've dreamed of." Marcus looked up from his phone. "Actually, there's one thing. I've got some clients who might be interested in your services, but they'd want to know you're discreet. You know, confidentiality agreements, that kind of thing." "Of course," I said. "Client privacy is fundamental to my business." "Good, because some of these people value their privacy very highly. They wouldn't want their personal business becoming public knowledge, if you know what I mean." The irony was breathtaking. Here was Marcus, planning to defraud his fiancée with his secret girlfriend, lecturing me about discretion and confidentiality. "I understand completely," I told him. "What happens during a wedding stays between me and my clients." Sarah beamed. "See? I told you Alex was perfect for this." Over the following weeks, I embedded myself deeper into their wedding preparations. I attended vendor meetings, helped coordinate delivery schedules, and even assisted with the seating chart. Every interaction gave me more insight into their relationship dynamics and more opportunities to document Marcus's deception. I also continued my surveillance of Marcus and Jessica. Their relationship was becoming more serious and more brazen. They'd started meeting more frequently, and Jessica had even begun appearing in some of Marcus's social media posts, though always as part of larger groups and never in ways that suggested romance. On December 15th, I witnessed something that crystallized my resolve to see this plan through. Marcus and Jessica were at their usual Tuesday night coffee shop meeting, but this time, Jessica was crying. "I can't keep doing this," she said, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. "Watching you plan a wedding with another woman, pretending to be happy for you both when people ask about it at work. It's killing me." Marcus reached across the table and took her hands. "Hey, we've been over this. It's temporary. Once the wedding is over and I get established with her family's business, we could be together openly. But what if you change your mind? What if you decide you actually like being married to her? That's not going to happen. You're the one I love, Jess. You're the one I want to spend my life with. Sarah is just, she's a means to an end. Promise me," Jessica said. "Promise me that this is all just temporary." Marcus pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a ring, not as expensive as Sarah's engagement ring, but clearly a promise ring of some kind. "This is my promise to you," he said, sliding it onto Jessica's finger. "We'll have our real engagement once I'm free. Our real wedding, our real life together." Jessica threw her arms around him and kissed him passionately, right there in the middle of the coffee shop, no longer caring who might see them. I photographed the entire exchange, including close-ups of the promise ring, and felt a level of disgust that surprised me with its intensity. Sarah was at home, probably working on wedding favors or addressing invitations, completely unaware that her fiancé was making promises to another woman. She trusted him so completely that she'd given him access to her bank accounts, her family's business connections, and her heart, never suspecting that he saw her as nothing more than a stepping stone to a better life. That night, I made a decision that would define the next phase of my plan. I wasn't just going to expose Marcus's affair. I was going to document his entire deception in a way that would protect Sarah not just from his betrayal, but from the financial and emotional manipulation he was planning. January brought a new level of wedding planning intensity, and my role as Sarah's unofficial coordination assistant gave me unprecedented access to the details of their relationship. What I discovered was even worse than I'd initially suspected. Marcus wasn't just planning to use Sarah for her family connections. He was already actively undermining her in subtle ways, conditioning her to doubt herself and become more dependent on him. During a venue walkthrough on January 8th, I watched him systematically dismiss every decision Sarah made. "Are you sure about these flowers?" he asked, looking at her carefully chosen centerpieces. "They seem a little much. Maybe something simpler would be more elegant." Sarah's face fell. "I thought they were beautiful, but if you think they're too much, it's your day, sweetheart. I just want you to be happy with your choices." But his tone suggested otherwise, and Sarah immediately began second-guessing herself. "Maybe he's right," she told me later, when Marcus had stepped away to take yet another work call. "I tend to go overboard with things. He has better taste than I do." "Sarah," I said carefully, "these are your wedding flowers. If you love them, that's what matters. But I want Marcus to be happy too. This is our day, not just mine." It was a pattern I observed repeatedly over the following weeks. Marcus would subtly criticize Sarah's choices, then frame it as wanting her to be happy, leaving her feeling uncertain about her own preferences. He was systematically eroding her confidence and making her more reliant on his approval. The financial manipulation was even more concerning. During a meeting with the caterer, I learned that Marcus had convinced Sarah to move their joint wedding fund to an account at his bank, claiming it would make vendor payments easier to track. "He's so good with money," Sarah told me. "I've never been great with financial stuff, so I'm glad he's taking care of it." When I asked Sarah about the honeymoon plans, she mentioned that Marcus had booked everything himself as a surprise. "He won't even tell me where we're going," she said, laughing. "He says it's going to be the trip of a lifetime." Later, I overheard Marcus on the phone discussing the honeymoon with someone, presumably Jessica. 2 weeks in Italy should be enough time to get her pregnant, he said. "Once there's a baby involved, she'll be even less likely to question anything. And her parents will be so excited about grandchildren that they'll fast-track bringing me into the business." The cold calculation of it was breathtaking. He wasn't just planning to defraud Sarah. He was planning to trap her with a pregnancy, ensuring she'd be financially and emotionally dependent on him when he eventually revealed his true nature. I realized that exposing the affair, while important, wasn't enough. I needed to document the entire scope of his manipulation and provide Sarah with evidence that would protect her legally and financially. So I expanded my documentation project. I began photographing everything. Every vendor meeting where Marcus undermined Sarah's confidence. Every financial document he asked her to sign. Every interaction where he exhibited controlling behavior. I also started recording conversations. Legally, Oregon is a one-party consent state, and as Sarah's hired vendor, I had legitimate business reasons to document planning discussions. The picture that emerged was of a sophisticated emotional and financial manipulation scheme that went far beyond a simple affair. Marcus had researched Sarah thoroughly before they started dating. He'd known about her family's wealth, her trusting nature, and her desire for marriage and children. He'd crafted his entire persona to appeal to her specific vulnerabilities, and he was systematically isolating her from her support network while making her dependent on his approval and guidance. Jessica was more than just his girlfriend. She was his accomplice. I discovered that she'd been feeding Marcus information about Sarah from their workplace, including details about her work schedule, her friendships with other nurses, and her personal insecurities. On February 2nd, I followed Jessica to a medical conference at the Oregon Convention Center and overheard a conversation that revealed the full scope of their scheme. Jessica was on the phone with Marcus during a break between sessions. "I've been working on the Stephanie situation," she said. "You know, Sarah's best friend for nursing school?" I mentioned to her that Sarah seemed stressed about wedding planning, and maybe she should give her some space to focus on getting married. "I think it's working. They've been texting less, and Sarah mentioned feeling like her friends don't understand what she's going through." "Perfect," Marcus replied, his voice carrying clearly through Jessica's phone. "The more isolated she feels, the more she'll depend on me for emotional support." "What about her family?" "I can't do much there directly, but I've been encouraging Sarah to keep wedding stress separate from family time. I told her it's important to protect her relationship with her parents by not burdening them with wedding drama." "You're brilliant. By the time we're married, she'll be so dependent on me that she won't question anything. And then we just have to wait out the timeline. 2 years, maybe 3. Long enough to establish myself in her father's business and build my own client base. Then I'll file for divorce, claim irreconcilable differences, and walk away with enough connections and capital to start my own firm. With me. With you. Our real life starts once I'm done playing house with Sarah." I had it all on audio, and I had a growing file of photographic evidence that documented not just the affair, but the entire conspiracy to defraud Sarah of her money, her family connections, and potentially years of her life. But I still wasn't ready to approach Sarah directly, because I knew that even with overwhelming evidence, Marcus was skilled enough at manipulation that he might be able to convince her that everything had an innocent explanation. Instead, I decided to use the wedding itself as the vehicle for revelation. I would create a wedding album that told the complete story of Marcus's deception, presented in a way that would be impossible to deny or explain away. February and March passed in a blur of wedding preparations and continued surveillance. Sarah was working herself into exhaustion, trying to make every detail perfect, while Marcus became increasingly absent from the planning process, claiming work demands, but actually spending more time with Jessica. I documented it all. Marcus missing vendor appointments because he was with Jessica. Sarah working late into the night on wedding favors while Marcus was out networking, photographed outside Jessica's apartment. The gradual erosion of Sarah's confidence as Marcus's subtle criticisms accumulated. But I also began implementing the technical aspects of my plan. I spent hours practicing composition techniques, studying the wedding venue layouts, and creating detailed diagrams of how I would position people for group photos that would spell out messages when properly arranged. The venue was the Abernethy Center in Oregon City, a beautiful historic building with multiple spaces for the ceremony and reception. Sarah had chosen it because it was where her parents had renewed their vows on their 25th anniversary, and she wanted to honor that family history. I spent multiple visits mapping out sight lines, measuring distances, and planning the specific shots that would make up my photographic revelation. Each image would look completely normal on its own, beautiful, professional wedding photography. But when assembled in sequence, they would tell the story of Marcus's betrayal. The technical challenge was enormous. I needed to create compositions that would spell out words when you connected the positioning of people in the photos, but I also needed those compositions to look natural and aesthetically pleasing. It required the kind of mathematical precision usually reserved for architectural photography, combined with the artistic sensibility needed for beautiful portraiture. I practiced with friends, using them as stand-ins to test different positioning strategies. I created detailed charts showing where each person needed to stand for each shot. I even built a scale model of the venue using cardboard and toy figures, mapping out every angle and composition. Meanwhile, my surveillance of Marcus and Jessica continued to reveal new depths to their deception. In late February, I discovered that Jessica had been using her access to hospital records to help Marcus identify potential personal injury clients. She would alert him when patients came in with injuries that might be the result of negligence or accidents, and he would find ways to approach them about legal representation. It was completely unethical and probably illegal, but it was also incredibly lucrative. Marcus's success at the law firm wasn't due to his legal skills. It was because he had inside information about potential cases before other lawyers even knew they existed. On March 15th, exactly 1 month before the wedding, I witnessed the most damning conversation yet. Marcus and Jessica were at their usual coffee shop, but this time they were joined by a third person, a man I later identified as Tony Brennan, one of the senior partners at Marcus's law firm. "The Chin construction contract is worth more than we initially thought," Brennan was saying. "They've got the inside track on 3 major development projects, and if we can get access to their bidding strategies, we could undercut them on future bids while maintaining plausible deniability." Marcus leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "David Chin's already talking about bringing me in as general counsel once Sarah and I are married. He wants to keep the legal work in the family, and he trusts me because I'm going to be his son-in-law." "Perfect," Brennan said. "Once you're inside, you'll have access to their client lists, their profit margins, their subcontractor relationships. We can use that information to build competing bids that undercut them just enough to win contracts without raising suspicions." Jessica shifted uncomfortably. "Isn't that? Couldn't that destroy Sarah's family business?" Marcus shrugged. "Business is competitive. David Chin didn't get where he is by being soft. If we can outmaneuver him using better information, that's just smart strategy. But Sarah will be devastated if her family loses their business." "Sarah will be fine," Marcus said dismissively. "She's a nurse. She'll always have her own income. And by the time any of this affects Chun Construction, we'll be divorced and it won't be my problem anymore." Brennan laughed. "I like your thinking, Holloway. This partnership is going to be very profitable." I had it all on tape, and I finally understood the full scope of what I was dealing with. This wasn't just Marcus cheating on Sarah. It was a corporate espionage scheme that involved his law firm and would ultimately destroy her family's business. Sarah wasn't just being betrayed personally. She was being used as an unwitting inside agent against her own family. That night, I made a decision that would define everything that followed. I wasn't just going to expose Marcus at the wedding. I was going to create a complete dossier of evidence that would protect Sarah legally, financially, and personally from the conspiracy against her. Over the following weeks, I compiled everything I'd gathered into a comprehensive file. Photographs of Marcus and Jessica together, audio recordings of their conversations, documentation of the medical record scheme, evidence of the corporate espionage plan, and a detailed timeline showing how Marcus had systematically manipulated Sarah throughout their relationship. But I still planned to reveal it all through the wedding photography, because I wanted Sarah to discover the truth in a way that couldn't be dismissed as jealousy, manipulation, or outside interference. The final weeks before the wedding were a masterclass in psychological manipulation, and I documented every moment of it. Marcus ramped up his controlling behavior, criticizing Sarah's choices while framing it as concern for her well-being. He convinced her to fire the wedding planner 2 weeks before the ceremony, claiming the woman was taking advantage of her trusting nature and overcharging for simple services. This left Sarah scrambling to coordinate everything herself, making her even more dependent on Marcus's help. He also began isolating her from her support network more aggressively. When Sarah's best friend from nursing school, Amy, offered to help with last-minute wedding preparations, Marcus suggested that Sarah shouldn't burden her friends with wedding stress. Amy has her own life to worry about, he told Sarah during a planning meeting I was photographing. Besides, do you really want someone else making decisions about our special day? This should be about us, not about keeping other people involved. Sarah, exhausted from managing everything alone, agreed. You're right. I don't want to impose on people. That's one of the things I love about you, Marcus said, kissing her forehead in a gesture that looked loving but felt manipulative. You're always thinking about others before yourself. I watched Sarah's confidence erode in real time. The vibrant, organized woman I'd met 6 months earlier was becoming anxious, second-guessing every decision, and increasingly dependent on Marcus's approval for even small choices. Meanwhile, Marcus and Jessica's relationship was becoming more brazen. They'd started meeting at restaurants closer to both their workplaces, apparently confident that their plan was so close to completion that discovery was unlikely. On April 5th, 10 days before the wedding, I followed them to an upscale jewelry store in downtown Portland. We need to be subtle about this, Marcus told the salesperson. It's for a surprise engagement, so we can't have it sized or customized until after a certain date. They spent an hour looking at engagement rings, with Jessica trying on various options while Marcus took photos for reference. The ring they finally selected was significantly more expensive than the one he'd given Sarah, a 2-carat solitaire that cost more than most people's cars. When do you think we can make it official? Jessica asked as they left the store. The timeline depends on how quickly I can establish myself with Chun Construction, Marcus replied. But I'm thinking we could have our real engagement by Christmas and be married by next summer. Sarah's divorce settlement will pay for our wedding. The casual cruelty of it never ceased to amaze me. He was planning their future using money he would steal from the woman who loved him. 3 days later, I witnessed something that nearly made me abandon my plan and confront Sarah immediately. Sarah had called me in a panic. The florist had delivered the wrong flowers for the bridal bouquet. White roses instead of the white peonies she'd specifically requested. She was crying when I arrived at her house, surrounded by wedding favors, programs, and the detritus of months of planning. Everything's going wrong, she sobbed. The flowers are wrong. The caterer wants to change the menu at the last minute, and my dress needs alterations because I've lost weight from stress. Maybe this is a sign that I'm not ready to get married. Marcus, who had been conspicuously absent during most of the crisis management, chose that moment to arrive. Instead of comforting Sarah, he made everything worse. Maybe you're right, he said, sitting down heavily on her couch. Maybe we are rushing into this. I mean, we could always postpone the wedding until you feel more prepared. Sarah looked stricken, but everyone's already made plans. Your parents are flying in tomorrow. My family's been looking forward to this for months. I'm just saying if you're having doubts. I'm not having doubts about marrying you, Sarah said quickly. I'm just stressed about the details. Are you sure? Because if you need more time to figure out what you want. It was masterful psychological manipulation. Marcus was making Sarah feel like her perfectly normal pre-wedding stress was actually doubt about their relationship, while positioning himself as the reasonable one who was willing to accommodate her uncertainty. No, Sarah said firmly. I want to marry you. I love you. I just want everything to be perfect. Marcus smiled and pulled her into his arms. That's all I needed to hear. And don't worry about the details. They don't matter as long as we're together. After he left, claiming he had an early morning meeting and needed to get rest, Sarah turned to me with tears in her eyes. He's right, isn't he? I'm being crazy about all these little things. Sarah, I said carefully, it's completely normal to want your wedding to be exactly how you've envisioned it. That doesn't make you crazy or unprepared. But maybe I'm being too controlling about the details. Marcus always says I tend to overthink things. Watching her doubt herself because of his systematic undermining of her confidence was heartbreaking, but it also strengthened my resolve to see this plan through. Sarah deserved to know not just about the affair, but about the psychological manipulation she'd been subjected to. 2 days before the wedding, I had my final vendor meeting with Sarah and Marcus. The purpose was to review the photography timeline and confirm the shot list, but it became another opportunity to observe their dynamic. Sarah had prepared, as always, a detailed list of must-have photos, family groupings, specific moment captures, and artistic shots she'd been dreaming about. Marcus barely looked at the list. "Just get the standard stuff," he said, scrolling through his phone. "Sarah tends to overcomplicate things." "Actually," I said, "Sarah's list is really thoughtful. These are the shots that will matter most to you in 20 years. Marcus looked up sharply. "I'm sure whatever you think is best will be fine." But Sarah beamed at the validation. "Really? You don't think I'm being too specific?" "Not at all. This is your day. You should get exactly the photos you want." It was a small moment, but watching Sarah's confidence return, even briefly, reminded me why I was doing this. She deserved to remember how strong and decisive she could be when she wasn't being systematically undermined. That evening, Marcus called me directly, the first time he'd ever initiated contact. "Listen," he said, "I wanted to talk to you about tomorrow. Sarah's been really stressed, and I'm worried that she might be emotional during the photo sessions. If she seems upset or starts second-guessing things, I might need you to just roll with whatever I decide is best, okay?" "Of course," I said. "I want the day to go smoothly for both of you." "Good. Because the most important thing is that Sarah feels supported and doesn't get overwhelmed by too many choices." The irony was staggering. Marcus was preemptively positioning himself as Sarah's protector while simultaneously planning to betray her in the most devastating way possible. April 15th dawned clear and bright, the perfect Portland spring day that Sarah had been hoping for. I arrived at the Abernethy Center at 7 a.m., 3 hours before the bridal party was scheduled to arrive, carrying more equipment than I'd ever brought to a single wedding. In addition to my usual cameras, lenses, and lighting equipment, I had a detailed set of diagrams showing exactly where each person needed to stand for every group photo. I had backup audio recording devices. I had printed copies of all the evidence I'd gathered over the past 6 months, sealed in an envelope marked for Sarah, "Open after your honeymoon." Most importantly, I had a complete plan for how to reveal Marcus's betrayal through the wedding photography itself. The venue was stunning. Sarah had chosen the Abernethy Center because of its historic charm and beautiful gardens, but also because it offered multiple spaces for different parts of the celebration. The ceremony would take place in the main hall, cocktail hour in the garden pavilion, and dinner and dancing in the ballroom. Each space offered different opportunities for the photographic storytelling I had planned. I spent the first hour setting up lighting equipment and testing angles. Every shot I would take that day had been planned and rehearsed, but I needed to account for the actual lighting conditions and spatial dynamics of the venue. At 8 a.m., I positioned myself outside the bridal suite and began documenting Sarah's wedding morning. This was always one of my favorite parts of wedding photography, capturing the anticipation, the joy, and the intimate moments as the bride prepared for her big day. Sarah was surrounded by her bridesmaids, her cousin Lisa, her college roommate Emma, her coworker Rachel, and her sister-in-law Katie. They were drinking champagne, doing each other's hair, and laughing in a way that only happens when women who love each other are sharing a special moment. "I can't believe this day is finally here," Sarah said, looking at herself in the mirror as Lisa pinned her veil in place. "I've been planning this for so long that it doesn't feel real." "You look absolutely stunning," Emma said, adjusting the train of Sarah's dress. "Marcus is going to cry when he sees you." If only they knew that Marcus was 2 floors down, texting Jessica and counting the hours until he could begin his real plan. The dress was a work of art, a classic A-line silhouette with delicate lace detailing that had been her grandmother's, updated with modern touches that made it uniquely Sarah's. She looked radiant, and for a moment, I almost forgot about the heartbreak that lay ahead. "Are you nervous?" Rachel asked, applying final touches to Sarah's makeup. "A little," Sarah admitted. but it's good nervous, you know? Like, I'm nervous because this matters so much to me. That's exactly how you should feel, Katie said. If you weren't nervous, it would mean you didn't care. I photographed all of it, capturing Sarah's joy and the love of the women surrounding her. Whatever happened later, I wanted her to have these images of pure happiness to look back on. At 10 a.m., I made my way to the groom's preparation room. The contrast couldn't have been starker. Marcus was surrounded by his groomsmen, his brother Jake, his law school buddy Ryan, his colleague from work David, and his childhood friend Mike. But instead of the excited anticipation I'd witnessed in the bridal suite, the mood here was more like a bachelor party that had gone on too long. Ready to lose your freedom, man? Jake asked, straightening Marcus's tie. Freedom's overrated, Marcus replied, checking his phone. Besides, marriage has its benefits. Yeah, like having someone to do your laundry and cook your meals, Ryan said, and the group laughed. I photographed them getting ready, but I also made sure to capture Marcus's frequent phone checks and the moments when he thought no one was looking and his facade slipped, revealing expressions of anxiety that had nothing to do with normal wedding nerves. At 11:30 a.m., both parties were ready for the pre-ceremony portraits. This was when my plan would begin in earnest. The pre-ceremony portraits were crucial to my plan because they would establish the visual language that would carry through the entire album. I needed to create images that looked beautiful and romantic while simultaneously beginning to tell the story of Marcus's deception. I started with individual portraits of Sarah. Against the backdrop of the venue's historic architecture, she looked like a princess from a fairy tale. Her grandmother's lace veil caught the morning light perfectly, and her smile was radiant with genuine happiness. "These are going to be beautiful," she said during a brief break. "I still can't believe I'm actually married. Well, about to be married. You look absolutely stunning," I told her, and I meant it. Whatever Marcus's betrayal would cost her, I wanted her to always remember how beautiful and happy she looked on this morning when she still believed in their love. Marcus's individual portraits were more challenging. He looked handsome, there was no denying that, but I made sure to capture the moments when his guard was down, when the strain of maintaining his deception showed around his eyes. "How much longer do you need?" he asked after about 10 minutes. "I've got some calls I need to make before the ceremony." "Just a few more shots," I said, wondering if those calls were to Jessica. The couple's portraits together required all of my technical and artistic skills. I needed them to look loving and romantic, because Sarah deserved to have beautiful engagement photos regardless of what I knew about Marcus, while also beginning to embed the clues that would later reveal the truth. I positioned them in front of a large window in the venue's main hall, with the morning light creating a soft, romantic glow. But I also made sure that their reflections in the window glass told a different story. Marcus's reflection showed him looking away from Sarah, checking his watch, while her reflection showed her gazing at him with complete adoration. "Can you both look at each other?" I directed. "I want to capture that connection." Sarah immediately turned toward Marcus with a smile that lit up her entire face. Marcus turned toward her too, but I could see through my viewfinder that his smile didn't reach his eyes. I took dozens of shots, each one capturing a different aspect of their dynamic. The images that would go in the wedding album would show a loving couple on their wedding day. But for someone who knew what to look for, the photos also documented the emotional imbalance in their relationship. At 1 p.m., the families began arriving for the pre-ceremony family portraits. This was where my plan would shift into its most technically complex phase. Sarah's family was warm and loving. Her parents, David and Linda Chun, were clearly emotional about their daughter's wedding day. David was a tall, distinguished man in his late 50s who had built Chun Construction from nothing into one of Portland's most successful contracting companies. Linda was elegant and gracious, the kind of woman who made everyone around her feel welcome. "We're so happy to welcome Marcus into our family," Linda told me as I arranged them for photos. Sarah's never been happier. Sarah's extended family was large and close-knit. Her grandparents had flown in from Taiwan, her aunts and uncles from various parts of the West Coast, and her numerous cousins had all made the trip to Portland for the wedding. Marcus's family was smaller and more reserved. His parents, Richard and Patricia Holloway, were polite but distant. Richard was a retired accountant, Patricia a former high school teacher. They seemed uncomfortable with the elaborate nature of the wedding, though they were clearly trying to be supportive. "It's certainly a beautiful venue," Patricia said, though her tone suggested she thought it was unnecessarily extravagant. Marcus's extended family consisted mostly of his brother Jake, a few cousins, and some family friends. The contrast between the two families was stark. Sarah's warm and welcoming, Marcus's formal and somewhat cold. But this contrast was perfect for my purposes because it would make the visual storytelling in the group photos more apparent to anyone who looked closely. I began with traditional family groupings: parents with a couple, siblings, grandparents, extended family. Standard wedding photography that would look completely normal in any wedding album. But I was also carefully positioning people to create visual patterns that would spell out messages when viewed in sequence. The first series of family photos, when arranged properly, spelled out "your husband," using the relative heights and positions of family members. Each individual photo looked perfectly normal, but when you connected the head heights of people in the photos, the letters became clear. The second series spelled out "is lying to you." The third series spelled out "about everything." It was exhausting work, requiring me to position dozens of people with mathematical precision while making it look like natural family portrait arrangements. But I'd practiced extensively, and my detailed diagrams made it possible to execute the plan even under the pressure of a wedding day timeline. "You're being very specific about where everyone stands," Davidson observed as I arranged the extended family for a large group shot. "I want to make sure everyone looks their best," I replied. The positioning affects how the light falls on each person's face. It was technically true, even if it wasn't the whole truth. At 2:30 p.m., with family photos complete, I had a brief break before the ceremony. I used this time to set up equipment in the main hall and review my ceremony shot list. The ceremony itself would provide opportunities for more subtle photographic storytelling. I planned to document not just Sarah and Marcus, but the reactions of everyone present, particularly Jessica, who I knew would be attending as a guest. I also used the break to check the envelope of evidence I'd prepared for Sarah. Everything was there: photographs of Marcus and Jessica together, audio transcriptions of their conversations, documentation of the corporate espionage plan, and a detailed timeline of Marcus's deception. The envelope was sealed and labeled with instructions for Sarah to open it only after she returned from her honeymoon. My plan was to give her the wedding album first, let her discover the photographic evidence, and then provide the supporting documentation that would help her understand the full scope of what had been done to her. At 3 p.m., guests began arriving for the 4 p.m. ceremony. I positioned myself to document their arrival, but I was particularly interested in photographing Jessica's entrance. She arrived precisely at 3:45 p.m., alone, wearing a navy blue dress that was elegant but not attention-grabbing. She took a seat in the third row on the groom's side, far enough back to avoid notice, but close enough to have a clear view of the ceremony. The audacity was breathtaking. She was actually attending the wedding of the man she was planning to marry once he finished defrauding his bride. But it was also perfect for my purposes because it meant I could document her presence and her reactions throughout the ceremony. At 4 p.m., the ceremony began. I positioned myself strategically to capture both the official moments and the audience reactions that would tell the complete story of what was really happening. The processional was beautiful. Sarah's bridesmaids walked down the aisle in flowing lavender dresses, followed by her matron of honor, Emma. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for: Sarah's entrance with her father. She looked absolutely radiant. The afternoon light streaming through the venue's tall windows created a natural spotlight, and her grandmother's veil fluttered perfectly as she walked. Davidson looked proud and emotional as he escorted his daughter down the aisle. I photographed the traditional moments: Sarah's entrance, David lifting her veil to kiss her cheek, the handoff to Marcus. But I also captured the moments between the moments. Marcus's expression when he first saw Sarah, which showed appreciation for her beauty, but not the overwhelming emotion you'd expect from a groom seeing his bride. Sarah's radiant smile as she approached the altar, and the reactions of various guests. Most importantly, I documented Jessica's reaction to seeing Sarah in her wedding dress. While everyone else looked moved by the bride's beauty, Jessica's expression showed something closer to guilt mixed with anticipation. The officiant was Reverend Patricia Williams, a family friend who had known Sarah since childhood. Her ceremony was personal and heartfelt, incorporating stories about Sarah and Marcus that Sarah had provided during their pre-wedding meetings. "Sarah," Reverend Williams said, "when you first told me about Marcus, you said he was someone who made you want to be the best version of yourself. You said he challenged you to grow while accepting you exactly as you are." I photographed Sarah's face during these words. Her expression showed pure love and gratitude as she looked at Marcus. "Marcus," the Reverend continued, "Sarah told me that you said she was the missing piece you didn't even know you were looking for. That meeting her made you understand what partnership really means." I photographed Marcus during these words. His expression was appropriately romantic, but I could see the tightness around his eyes that suggested discomfort with the sentiment. The vow exchange was the most difficult part for me to document. Sarah had written her own vows, and they were beautiful and heartfelt. "Marcus," she said, her voice strong despite her tears, "3 years ago, you asked me to dance at a charity gala, and I had no idea that dance would change my entire life. You've shown me what it means to be truly partnered with someone. You've supported my dreams, encouraged my ambitions, and loved me not in spite of my flaws, but because of the whole person they make me." She paused, wiping away tears. "I promise to be your best friend, your biggest supporter, and your partner in everything life brings us. I promise to trust you completely, to communicate openly, and to choose our love every day, even when it's difficult." The irony was devastating. Sarah was promising to trust someone who was systematically betraying that trust. Marcus's vows were more generic, but perfectly delivered. "Sarah," he said, "you've brought joy and stability into my life in ways I never expected. You've shown me what it means to put someone else's happiness before your own, and you've made me want to be the man you deserve." The words were beautiful, and his delivery was convincing. But knowing what I knew about his real intentions made every syllable feel like a knife twist. "I promise to love you, to protect you, and to put our marriage first in everything I do. I promise to be honest with you always, and to build a life with you that honors both of our dreams." I photographed Sarah's face during his vows. She was crying tears of joy, completely believing every word. The ring exchange followed, and I made sure to capture close-ups of both rings. Sarah's engagement ring and wedding band were family heirlooms, passed down through generations of Chun women. Marcus's wedding ring was new, expensive, and would probably be removed as soon as he thought he could get away with it. By the power vested in me by the state of Oregon and in the presence of this loving community, Reverend Williams said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Marcus, you may kiss your bride." The kiss was perfect for the cameras, romantic, emotional, and exactly what everyone expected to see. I photographed it from multiple angles, but I also made sure to capture the audience's reactions. Sarah's family looked joyful and emotional. Marcus's family looked appropriately pleased, and Jessica looked like she was watching a performance that she couldn't wait to see end. As the couple walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, I photographed their exit, the guest reactions, and the overall celebration. It was a beautiful ceremony, and despite everything I knew, I found myself hoping that somehow I was wrong about Marcus's intentions. But then I saw him check his phone during the recessional, and I knew that nothing had changed. The cocktail hour took place in the venue's garden pavilion, a beautiful outdoor space with string lights and blooming flowers. This was when my photographic plan would begin to accelerate, as the informal nature of cocktail hour allowed me more flexibility in positioning people for the shots that would reveal the truth. I started with the traditional receiving line photos, documenting Sarah and Marcus greeting their guests. These images would look completely normal in the wedding album, but I was actually creating a visual timeline that would later prove significant. At 5:15 p.m., I photographed Marcus hugging Jessica as she went through the receiving line. To any casual observer, it looked like a normal interaction between the groom and a guest. But I made sure to capture the duration of the hug, longer than appropriate. their body language more intimate than warranted, and the expression on Jessica's face far too familiar for someone who was supposedly just a casual acquaintance. Sarah, standing right next to Marcus, had no idea she was watching her new husband embrace his girlfriend. During the cocktail hour, I circulated among the guests, taking candid shots that documented the celebration but also told a deeper story. I photographed conversations between Marcus and various guests, capturing his expressions when he thought no one was watching. At 5:30 p.m., I observed Marcus step away from the reception to take a phone call. I followed at a distance and photographed him through the window of a small alcove, clearly agitated and speaking intensely to someone. When he returned, he seemed tense and distracted. "Everything okay?" Sarah asked, noticing his mood change. "Just work stuff," Marcus replied, forcing a smile. "Nothing that can't wait until after our honeymoon." But I'd seen his expression during that phone call, and it wasn't about work. It was about Jessica, and whatever they discussed had clearly stressed him out. At 6 p.m., the cocktail hour ended and guests moved into the ballroom for dinner. This was when I would implement the most complex part of my photographic plan, the group shots that would spell out the complete story of Marcus's deception. The ballroom was stunning. Sarah had spent months planning every detail, from the centerpieces, white peonies and eucalyptus, finally delivered correctly, to the lighting, warm and romantic, perfect for photography. The room could have been featured in a wedding magazine. Before dinner service began, I had a crucial window for the formal group photos that would form the backbone of my revelation. I planned these shots with mathematical precision, and executing them required all of my technical skills and creative problem-solving abilities. "All right, everyone," I'd announced to the wedding party, "let's get some beautiful group shots while we have perfect lighting." The wedding party consisted of 8 people plus Sarah and Marcus, for bridesmaids, for groomsmen, and the maid of honor and best man. I'd spent weeks planning how to position these 10 people to spell out messages that would be revealed when the photos were viewed in sequence. The first group shot positioned everyone to spell when you connected their head heights. Sarah and Marcus were in the center, looking radiant and happy, while their wedding party arranged around them created the letter formation. "Everyone shift slightly to the left," I directed, making micro adjustments to ensure the positioning was perfect. "Emma, can you step back just a bit?" "Jake, move closer to Sarah." To anyone watching, it looked like standard wedding photography, a photographer making adjustments to ensure everyone looked their best. But every movement was calculated to create the precise letter formations I needed. The second group shot spelled husband, with different positioning that still looked natural and aesthetically pleasing. The third shot spelled has the fourth been the fifth cheating. Each individual photo was beautiful, the kind of formal wedding party shots that would look perfect in any wedding album. But when viewed in sequence and properly decoded, they told a devastating story. The technical challenge was enormous. I had to position 10 people with mathematical precision while making it look like artistic composition. I had to account for different heights, ensure everyone looked good in the photos, and maintain the natural flow of the wedding reception. But the months of preparation paid off. My detailed diagrams and practice sessions had prepared me for this moment, and I executed the plan flawlessly. "These are going to be beautiful," Sarah said during a brief break between shots. "I love how you're arranging everyone. It looks so elegant." "Thank you," I replied, feeling a complex mix of satisfaction at the technical achievement and heartbreak for what it would ultimately reveal to her. The final group shot in this series positioned everyone to spell with, but I saved the revelation of with whom for later in the evening. After completing the wedding party shots, I moved on to the extended family photos. These would provide the context and supporting details that would make the overall story impossible to dismiss. I photographed Sarah with her parents, her grandparents, her extended family. Every shot showed her surrounded by people who loved her and supported her. The happiness on their faces was genuine, and their joy for Sarah was unmistakable. Marcus's family photos told a different story. While his parents and brother were clearly trying to be supportive, there was a formality to their interactions that contrasted sharply with the warmth of Sarah's family. But more importantly, I made sure to capture Marcus's expressions during these family photos, moments when his facade slipped and revealed his impatience with the proceedings. At 7 p.m., dinner service began, and I shifted to documentary-style photography, capturing the toasts, the conversations, and the overall celebration. But I was also watching for specific moments that would add to the photographic narrative. The best man's toast was particularly important to document. Jake stood up with a champagne glass and delivered what sounded like a heartfelt tribute to his brother's happiness. "I've known Marcus my whole life," Jake said, "and I've never seen him as happy as he's been since he met Sarah. She brings out the best in him, and their love is something special." I photographed Marcus during this toast, capturing his expression as his brother praised a love that Marcus didn't actually feel. While everyone else looked moved by Jake's words, Marcus looked uncomfortable, checking his phone under the table. Sarah's maid of honor, Emma, gave the next toast, and the contrast was striking. "Sarah has been my best friend since college," Emma said, her voice thick with emotion. "She has the biggest heart of anyone I know, and she deserves all the happiness in the world. Marcus, you're getting an incredible woman, and I know you'll treasure her the way she deserves." I photographed Sarah during Emma's toast, capturing her tears of joy and gratitude. Then I captured Marcus's reaction, appropriate smiles and nods, but nothing that suggested he was moved by the sentiment. The father of the bride's speech was the most emotional moment of the evening. David Chun stood up, clearly struggling with his emotions, and addressed the room. "Sarah has been the light of our lives since the day she was born," he said, his voice wavering. "She's brilliant, compassionate, and stronger than she knows. Marcus, you're not just gaining a wife. You're becoming part of a family that will support you and love you unconditionally." He paused, looking directly at Marcus. "I'm trusting you with the most precious thing in my world. I know you'll protect her heart the way Linda and I have tried to do." I photographed Marcus during this speech, capturing his expression as Sarah's father talked about trust and protection. While David spoke about unconditional family support, Marcus looked like he was calculating the business opportunities this represented. But I also made sure to document the moment when David pulled a small wrapped box from his pocket. "Sarah, this was your grandmother's," he said, handing her the box. "She wanted you to have it on your wedding day." Inside was a delicate jade bracelet, clearly an antique and obviously valuable both sentimentally and financially. Sarah burst into tears as she put it on, and the entire room was moved by the gesture. Except Marcus, who I noticed was studying the bracelet with what looked like appraisal rather than appreciation. At 8:30 p.m., the dancing began, and this was when I would capture the final elements of my photographic revelation. The first dance was to "At Last" by Etta James, Sarah's choice because she said it perfectly captured how she felt about finding Marcus. The irony was devastating, but I photographed the entire dance, capturing both the beauty of the moment and the subtle details that revealed the truth. Sarah danced like she was floating, completely lost in what she believed was the perfect moment. Marcus danced well. He'd clearly taken lessons, but I could see through my viewfinder that his attention kept drifting to other parts of the room. Specifically, to Jessica, who was sitting at a table near the edge of the dance floor. I made sure to capture Marcus's glances toward Jessica during the first dance, positioning myself to show both his face and her location in the same frame. To a casual observer, it might look like the groom was acknowledging guests during his first dance. But for someone who knew what to look for, it was clear evidence of where his real attention was. After the father-daughter dance and traditional anniversary dance, I implemented the final phase of my photographic plan. The subsequent group shots would complete the message I'd been embedding throughout the evening. The next series of group photos, featuring different combinations of wedding guests, spelled out Jessica when viewed in sequence. I made sure to capture Jessica herself in several of these shots, positioning her within the letter formations in a way that would make her identity unmistakable when Sarah eventually decoded the message. The final series spelled out "From Work," completing the identification. By 10 p.m., I had documented everything I needed. The wedding album would tell the complete story. Your husband has been cheating with Jessica from work. But more than that, It would provide Sarah with a comprehensive record of Marcus's deception, manipulation, and fraud. The reception continued until midnight, and I documented every moment of Sarah's happiness, knowing it would be the last time she experienced such joy for quite some time. She danced with abandon, laughed with her friends and family, and glowed with the confidence of a woman who believed she had married her soulmate. Marcus played his part perfectly until the very end, though I noticed him stepping away several times to check his phone. During one of these absences, I followed him and photographed him texting someone, undoubtedly Jessica, while his bride danced with her bridesmaids just yards away. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, I packed up my equipment with a heavy heart. The next few weeks would be crucial. I needed to process the photographs, create the wedding album, and prepare the supporting documentation that would help Sarah understand the full scope of what had been done to her. I spent the next 2 weeks processing over 3,000 photographs from the wedding day. Every image was carefully edited and enhanced, but I paid special attention to the group shots that contained the hidden messages. I wanted them to look beautiful and professional while still clearly revealing the encoded information. The album itself was a work of art. 150 pages of premium photographs bound in Italian leather with Sarah's name embossed in gold on the cover. To anyone flipping through casually, it would appear to be a stunning documentation of a perfect wedding day. But for someone who took the time to study the group photos carefully, connecting the positioning of people across multiple images, the hidden messages would gradually become clear. I also prepared a detailed decoder key that explained how to read the photographic messages, along with timestamps and reference points that would help Sarah navigate through the revelation systematically. The envelope of supporting evidence had grown substantially during the wedding planning process. It now contained over 200 photographs documenting Marcus and Jessica's relationship, audio transcripts of their conversations about defrauding Sarah, documentation of the medical record scheme at OHSU, evidence of the planned corporate espionage against Chun Construction, financial records showing Marcus's precarious situation and Sarah's vulnerability, a detailed timeline of Marcus's systematic manipulation throughout their relationship. 3 weeks after the wedding, I called Sarah to schedule the album delivery. "I'm so excited to see how everything turned out," she said, her voice bright with happiness. "Marcus and I have been dying to see the photos. The honeymoon was amazing. Italy was everything I dreamed it would be. The album turned out beautifully," I told her. "Why don't you look through it together, and then call me if you have any questions." "Questions? About what?" "Just if anything seems unclear, or if you want to discuss any of the artistic choices I made." "I'm sure it's perfect. You're so talented, Alex. Marcus was just saying how lucky we were to find you." The irony cut deep, but I pressed forward. "I'll drop it off this afternoon. Take your time going through it." I delivered the album on a Tuesday evening, exactly 6 weeks after the wedding. Sarah answered the door in casual clothes, looking relaxed and happy in the way that newlyweds do when they're still basking in the glow of new marriage. "I can't wait to see it," she said, accepting the elegant box that contained the album. "Marcus is working late, but I might sneak a peek before he gets home." "Actually," I said carefully, "you might want to wait and go through it together. It's comprehensive." "Comprehensive?" "Just very detailed. I captured a lot of moments throughout the day." After I left, I drove to a coffee shop nearby and waited. Based on my psychological profile of Sarah, I estimated it would take her approximately 2 hours to work through the album and decode the messages, assuming she approached it methodically and took time to study the group photos carefully. My phone rang at exactly 9:47 p.m. "Alex." Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. "I need you to come back. Now." "What's wrong?" "You know what's wrong. Please, just come back." When I arrived, Sarah was sitting on her living room floor, surrounded by the album pages she'd carefully removed from their binding. She'd arranged them in the sequence that spelled out the hidden messages, and the truth was laid out before her like a devastating puzzle finally solved. "How long have you known?" she asked without looking up. "Since before your engagement session. I saw them together in Riverside Park." 6 months. Her voice was hollow. "You've known for 6 months, and you let me go through with it. Sarah, I trusted you. I brought you into my wedding, into my family, and you let me marry someone who—" She gestured at the photographs. "Someone who was planning to destroy my life." I sat down across from her, maintaining distance but staying close enough to offer support. "If I had told you 6 months ago, would you have believed me?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment, studying the photographs that documented her husband's betrayal. "Probably not," she admitted. "I would have thought you were jealous or trying to sabotage the wedding for some reason. I needed to give you proof that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. Evidence that would protect you legally and financially." "Financially?" I handed her the sealed envelope. "There's more. Much more." Sarah spent the next 3 hours reading through the documentation I'd compiled. I sat with her as she discovered the scope of Marcus's deception, the corporate espionage plan, the medical records scheme, the systematic psychological manipulation, and the calculated way he'd targeted her specifically for her family's wealth and connections. "He never loved me," she said finally, her voice remarkably steady. "Not even a little bit. I don't know if Marcus is capable of loving anyone but himself. And Jessica, she works at my hospital. I've probably seen her dozens of times and never knew she was." Sarah shook her head. "They must have laughed about me. Poor, trusting Sarah, so easy to manipulate. Sarah, none of this is your fault. You trusted someone who presented himself as trustworthy. That speaks to your character, not to any failing on your part. But I was so naive. All those times he undermined my confidence, made me second-guess myself, and I accepted it. I thought he was helping me be better. That's called gaslighting, and it's a deliberate psychological manipulation technique. The fact that it worked doesn't mean you're weak or stupid. It means he's skilled at emotional abuse." Sarah stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Portland skyline. "What do I do now? We just got married. My whole family was there. Everyone thinks we're this perfect couple. What do you want to do?" "I want to disappear. I want to crawl into a hole and pretend none of this happened." "That's understandable, but it's not going to solve the problem. Marcus is still out there, probably with Jessica right now, celebrating the success of their plan. And your family business is still in danger." Sarah turned back to face me. "My father. Oh God, my father. He was talking about bringing Marcus into the company. He trusts him completely, which is why we need to act quickly. The longer Marcus has access to your family's business information, the more damage he can do. Sarah, I've spent 6 months investigating this situation. I have documentation, evidence, and a complete understanding of Marcus's plan. If you want to fight this, I'll help you." She was quiet for a long time, processing the magnitude of what she'd learned. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed. The devastated whisper was gone, replaced by something harder and more determined. "I want to destroy him." Over the next week, Sarah and I worked together to build a comprehensive legal case against Marcus and Jessica. We contacted Sarah's family attorney, who put us in touch with a specialist in fraud and corporate espionage cases. The attorney, Rebecca Martinez, was impressed by the thoroughness of my documentation. "This is some of the most complete evidence I've seen in a case like this," she said during our initial meeting. "You have documentation of conspiracy to commit fraud, planned corporate espionage, medical privacy violations, and systematic emotional abuse. The photographs alone constitute evidence of adultery, which will be important for the divorce proceedings." "Divorce proceedings?" Sarah looked stricken. "We've been married for 6 weeks. "Sarah," Rebecca said gently, "staying married to Marcus puts you and your family at continued risk. Every day he has access to your finances and your family's business information is another day he can cause irreparable damage. But everyone will know. My family, my friends, my coworkers. They'll all know that my marriage was a fraud. They'll also know that you were strong enough to protect yourself and your family when you discover the truth," I pointed out. "That takes courage." Rebecca outlined our options. We could file for immediate divorce on grounds of fraud and adultery. We could pursue criminal charges for the corporate espionage plan and the medical record violations. We could seek restraining orders to prevent Marcus from contacting Sarah or accessing her family's business. "What about Jessica?" Sarah asked. "She's culpable as an accomplice to conspiracy and fraud. She could face criminal charges and definitely civil liability. Her nursing license would be in jeopardy because of the medical records violations. Good, Sarah said with surprising vehemence. I want her to lose everything, the way she was willing to let me lose everything. Sarah, I said carefully, I understand the anger, but don't let the desire for revenge consume you. Focus on protecting yourself and getting your life back. You're right, she said, taking a deep breath. But I also want justice. For me, for my family, and for any other women Marcus might target in the future. The legal proceedings moved quickly. Marcus was arrested 3 days after the restaurant confrontation, charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted corporate espionage, and multiple counts of medical privacy violations. Jessica was arrested the same day on similar charges, plus conspiracy and accomplice charges. The story made local news, but Sarah's attorney had prepared her well for the media attention. She gave one interview to a Portland newspaper, focusing on the importance of trusting your instincts and seeking help when something feels wrong. I want other women to know that sophisticated manipulation can happen to anyone, she said in the interview. Being targeted by a predator doesn't make you weak or stupid. Fighting back makes you strong. Marcus's law firm fired him immediately and launched an internal investigation into his other cases. They discovered that the medical record scheme had been going on for over a year, potentially affecting dozens of patients and generating illegal profits for the firm. Jessica lost her nursing license and was facing both criminal charges and civil liability for the privacy violations. Her career in healthcare was effectively over. The divorce was finalized 4 months after Sarah discovered the truth. Because of the fraud and adultery, Sarah was awarded a significant settlement, including reimbursement for all wedding expenses and compensation for emotional damages. But more importantly, Sarah began the process of rebuilding her life and her confidence. 6 months after the wedding that never should have happened, I received a call from Sarah. Alex, I have a favor to ask. Of course. What do you need? My friend Emma is getting married next spring, and she wants to hire you as her photographer. But she's worried that, given everything that happened with my wedding, you might not want to take on another wedding. I laughed. Sarah, your wedding wasn't a failure of photography. It was a success of photography. I documented the truth, and that truth protected you and your family from years of fraud and manipulation. I know. That's why Emma wants to hire you. She said anyone who could create a wedding album that saves someone's life is exactly the kind of photographer she wants. How are you doing? Really? Better. Some days are harder than others, but I'm getting therapy, I'm rebuilding my confidence, and I'm starting to trust my own judgment again. I actually started dating someone new. Oh, another nurse from the hospital. Someone who knew me before Marcus, who remembers what I was like when I was confident and decisive. He helps me remember that version of myself. That's wonderful. Alex, I need you to know something. What you did, documenting everything, giving me the evidence I needed to protect myself, it saved my life. Not just financially, but emotionally. If I had stayed married to Marcus, if he had succeeded in isolating me and breaking down my confidence completely, I don't know if I would have ever found my way back to myself. You're stronger than you know, Sarah. You always were. Maybe, but having someone in my corner, someone who saw what was happening and refused to let it continue, made all the difference. 2 years later, Marcus pleaded guilty to reduced charges and served 18 months in prison, followed by community service and restitution payments to Sarah and her family. His law license was permanently revoked. Jessica served 6 months and lost her nursing license permanently. She moved away from Portland and, as far as I know, never worked in healthcare again. Sarah thrived. She completed a master's degree in pediatric nursing, was promoted to head nurse in her department, and became an advocate for victims of domestic and financial abuse. She spoke at conferences and wrote articles about recognizing manipulation in relationships. 2 years after her disastrous wedding, she married David Kim, the nurse who had helped her remember herself. I photographed their wedding, a small, intimate ceremony with just family and close friends. The photos showed a confident, radiant woman who knew exactly what she wanted and wasn't afraid to ask for it. The wedding album I created for Sarah and Marcus was never displayed in their home, but it wasn't destroyed either. Sarah kept it in her attorney's safe, along with all the other evidence from the case. It's a reminder, she told me, of what I survived and how strong I really am. As for me, the experience changed how I approach wedding photography. I still focus on capturing beauty and joy, but I also pay attention to the dynamics between couples, the subtle signs of manipulation or control, the moments when the facade slips and reveals something darker underneath. I've never had to use my documentation skills to expose another fraud, but I've learned to trust my instincts when something feels wrong. And I always include a clause in my contracts now that allows me to provide evidence to clients if I discover information that affects their safety or well-being. Some people might argue that what I did was an invasion of privacy, that I overstepped my role as a wedding photographer. But I sleep well at night, knowing that I helped protect a kind, trusting woman from a predator who would have destroyed her life. That's the story worth remembering. Not the elaborate deception or the sophisticated revenge, but the moment when someone chose to help another person, even when it was difficult and complicated and messy. Sarah deserved better than Marcus Holloway, and now she has it. That's the only ending that really matters.